Have you ever wondered how a single assassination could trigger a global conflict that would shape the course of history? In the early 20th century, Europe was a tangled web of alliances, rivalries, and simmering tensions. Amidst this volatile backdrop, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria on June 28, 1914, in Sarajevo, proved to be the spark that ignited the flame of World War I. Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was on a visit to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, when he was assassinated by a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. The ripples of this single act of violence spread far and wide, setting in motion a chain of events that would draw countries from all corners of the globe into a devastating conflict. You see, the Europe of the time was a powder keg, ready to explode. The great powers of the continent were divided into two major alliances, the Triple Entente, comprising of France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, and the Central Powers, consisting of Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand set these alliances on a collision course. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, declared war on Serbia, who was allied with Russia. As the dominoes fell, one by one, countries were dragged into the conflict, bound by their ties of alliance. The United Kingdom, allied with France and Russia, declared war on Germany. Suddenly, a local conflict had escalated into a global war. This war, which many thought would be over by Christmas, instead raged on for over 4 long years, causing unprecedented destruction and loss of life. It changed the world in ways that were unimaginable before, and its echoes can still be heard today. And so, with a gunshot in Sarajevo, the world was set on a path to war. As the world held its breath, the gears of war began to turn. In the summer of 1914, a single gunshot in Sarajevo set off a chain of events that would change the world forever. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary triggered a complex web of alliances and rivalries, igniting the spark that would become the Great War. Germany, under the Schlieffen Plan, decided to strike first, marching through neutral Belgium to get to France. This invasion was a clear violation of Belgium's neutrality, a status respected by European powers since the Treaty of London in 1839. The world watched in shock as the Belgian countryside was ravaged, and cities like Liège and Namur fell to the German forces. Britain, bound by the century-old treaty, was compelled to step in. On the 4th of August, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. It was a moment that signaled the end of any lingering hopes for peace. The initial stages of the war were marked by rapid movement and significant territorial gains, particularly by the Germans. But this was not a war like those of the past. This was a war of machines, a war of technology. The Industrial Revolution had brought about significant advancements in warfare. Rapid-fire machine guns, heavy artillery, and armored vehicles transformed the battlefield into a landscape of steel and fire. Even the skies and the seas were not spared, with the use of airplanes and submarines introducing a new dimension to the conflict. These technological advancements, while awe-inspiring, also made the war more deadly. The scale of destruction was unprecedented, and the human cost was unimaginable. The invasion of Belgium marked the beginning of a war that would span across continents, from the trenches of Western Europe to the deserts of the Middle East, from the icy waters of the Atlantic to the jungles of Africa. The world had seen wars before, but none with such global reach and devastating potential. The war had begun with rapid movement, but it soon bogged down into a horrifying stalemate. Looking at the Western Front, we find a chilling picture of trench warfare. Miles upon miles of muddy ditches, punctuated by the sporadic rat-tat-tat of machine guns and the haunting wail of artillery fire. These trenches, these scars on the face of Europe, served as the grim homes to millions of soldiers. The static nature of trench warfare led to a terrifying war of attrition, with neither side gaining significant ground for long periods of time. The terrain between the opposing trenches, known as no man's land, became a deadly gauntlet that few dared to cross. Barbed wire, mines, and the constant threat of enemy fire turned it into a veritable death trap. In this grim setting, two battles stand out as stark examples of the horrifying realities of the war. The battles of the Somme and Verdun. The Battle of the Somme, fought in the summer and autumn of 1916, is one of the bloodiest military conflicts in history. On the first day alone, The British Army suffered over 57,000 casualties. The battle raged on for months, with neither side able to secure a decisive victory. At the same time, the Battle of Verdun was leaving its own indelible mark on the war. Lasting nearly the entire year of 1916, it resulted in over 700,000 casualties between the French and German armies. The phrase, "they shall not pass," became a rallying cry for the French forces as they held their ground against the onslaught. These battles, these horrifying displays of human suffering and resilience, encapsulate the true horror of the stalemate on the Western Front. The cost in human lives was staggering, and the physical and psychological scars ran deep. In the trenches of the Western Front, the war seemed endless, and victory seemed a distant dream. But even in the darkest hour, the tide of war can turn. As we delve deeper into the history of World War I, we come to a pivotal moment when the scales began to tip. It was the year 1917, and the entrance of the United States into the fray marked a significant shift in the balance of power. The United States had remained neutral for much of the early years of the war, but the sinking of American ships by German submarines and the revelation of a proposed alliance between Germany and Mexico ultimately drove them to join the Allies. This decision was a game-changer, bringing a wave of fresh troops, abundant resources, and renewed morale to the beleaguered Allies. Key battles played out around this time that began to signal a shift in momentum. One such confrontation was the Battle of Messines in June of 1917, where the Allies used a series of underground explosions to gain an advantage, marking a significant victory for the British forces. A few months later, the Battle of Cambrai showed the world the power of a new war machine, the tank. This marked another turning point, as tanks offered a solution to the stalemate on the Western Front, breaking through the heavily fortified German lines. And then, in the summer of 1918, the Second Battle of the Marne saw the last major German offensive being repelled by the Allies, with significant help from the American forces. This was the beginning of the end for the Central Powers, as the Allies began their relentless push towards the German border. Each of these battles, each of these moments, represented a turning of the tide. They were the first glimmers of light in the dark tunnel of war. The entrance of the United States into the conflict, the innovative tactics, and the relentless spirit of the Allies began to turn the tide in their favor. With fresh resources and resolve, the Allies began to push back, inching closer to victory. The end was not yet in sight, but the path was becoming clearer. The tide had indeed turned. Finally, after 4 long years of bloodshed, the end was in sight. The world held its breath as the ink dried on the armistice, the agreement that would effectively end the war. On November 11, 1918, the world heaved a collective sigh of relief as the news of the armistice signing spread across the globe. A war that had ravaged nations, torn families apart, and forever altered the course of human history was finally at an end. Yet, as the celebrations began, the world could not forget the staggering human cost of this conflict. The war had claimed the lives of millions and left countless more injured and displaced. Entire generations had been marked by the horrors of battle, their lives irrevocably changed. And so, as the clock struck the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns fell silent. The world, though forever scarred, could finally begin the long journey towards healing and recovery. But the end of the war was not the end of its impact. The Treaty of Versailles marked the formal conclusion of World War I, but its stipulations and consequences reverberated far beyond the signing. Germany, as the defeated party, bore the brunt of punitive measures. The treaty demanded significant territorial concessions and imposed heavy financial reparations that crippled the German economy for years to come. The aftershocks didn't stop at national boundaries. The map of Europe was redrawn, old empires dissolved, and new nations emerged, setting the stage for geopolitical frictions that persist to this day. The war also sparked profound social and political changes. It fueled the rise of radical ideologies, shook the faith in traditional institutions, and led to an unprecedented mobilization of women in the workforce. World War I reshaped the world in ways that are still felt today, a stark reminder of the devastating